So if you got into around level 50, you probably felt the same way that I did. Not every player feels this way, but I know that I was definitely starting to feel the burnout with this game, because when I got to level 50, the game didn't really tell me what the next step was. And so I just naturally started exploring the world and gathering legendaries, and started to notice just how astronomically slow progression felt from 50 and up. And the main reason for that is because I made a huge mistake. I didn't know how fleshed out the Paragon levels could end up being. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today's video. Now, first and foremost, just to get to the point of it, I didn't know that you can actually attach another board to your Paragon skill tree. This just unlocked a whole world of imagination for me and got me really, really excited, because basically it means that, oh, I'm not supposed to be grinding for legendaries. From level 50 to 70, I'm supposed to be focusing on getting as much XP as possible so I can unlock more Paragon slots, right? And then from level 70 and up, you're gonna be in World Tier 4, and I assume that that is when all of the legendaries and unique gear really starts to unload on you. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that you don't want to end up farming for rare gear in World Tier 3, but any of us that have farmed long enough know that you kind of just get a couple quick stat bumps with sacred gear. Maybe you find a good unique or two, but for the most part, the legendaries are very, very limited and don't really unlock too many more options as soon as you end up getting to World Tier 3. So in my opinion, that's where the Paragon tree comes into play. Now, what happens with the Paragon levels? Well, when you end up getting to level 50, then from that point on, there are going to be 3 Paragon points throughout a character's level that you'll be able to end up getting. And each 3 points, or each point, I should say, you can end up investing in the Paragon skill tree. Now, unlike the class skill tree, the Paragon points are kind of linear. So I can't pull my points out of this unless I pull my points out of here first in linear progression. You have to always pull out from the furthest you are in the skill tree. But you're gonna notice that there's going to be normal nodes, there's gonna be magic nodes, and there's gonna be rare nodes. There's also legendary nodes, and more specifically, there are also going to end up being the glyph nodes. And glyphs themselves they're a whole other thing. They're a whole other can of worms that I honestly really, really don't like the glyphs. They're basically going to end up being the greater runes or greater gems from Diablo Immortal, obviously without the paywall, but I still just really don't like the idea that we essentially still have greater rifts to grind. They've just been renamed to nightmare dungeons, and they have a whole other bunch of issues with them that I just personally am not super into. But you're going to start at this Paragon node, and as you end up going through here, you'll notice that the rare nodes will actually give you bonus buffs so long as you end up having enough stats. So you can see I got 110 out of 170 dexterity. I could either get that dexterity through the skill tree itself by unlocking various different points and so on and so forth, because each of these gives us different stats. They're all picture specific as well. So the dagger with the 2 hands is dexterity in this example. But I have heard that you can actually end up getting the stats to unlock these bonus Paragon nodes from gear as well. So if I just had a crap ton of dexterity on my gear, it would end up unlocking this passive. So as you end up going up here, you'll notice that there is this weird socket right here that has like a red ring around it. That is your glyph socket. So you'll notice that you've probably already gotten yourself a bunch of different glyphs. These are going to end up being rare drops that you can get your hands on. That will basically end up giving you different passive abilities so long as certain requirements are met. So this is the one that I currently have socketed into my glyph node, which is going to end up having a radius of 3 blocks away from it. So 1, 2, 3, you can see the red ring around here. The reason why it has the radius is because if this thing will communicate with any of the other nodes in the area, essentially it has to have 40 intelligence from the other nodes in order to give me the bonus additional buff that you can see, the additional bonus, right? But otherwise, there's going to end up being the first bonus from the node, which in my case is for every intelligence purchased within range. My skeleton minions will deal increased damage. But as you can see, it only really goes to a limited range. It doesn't really go out too far. And the reason for that is because you can level up every single one of the glyphs by completing nightmare dungeons. So once you complete a nightmare dungeon, you'll get this weird thing you can interact with, and then you can end up spending the limited amount of XP that you get out of it appropriately on your glyphs. I do not like this system. I find it to be very rigid and very against the philosophy of this game. Like, the thing that I think is so cool about this game is how quickly you can just experiment and swap your build. And the glyphs are a lot more rigid, almost punishing you for leveling up the wrong glyph, because it's basically just wasting your time and effort. And I haven't seen any method to pull the XP out of a glyph and put it into another one, which kind of, I guess, defeats the purpose of investing in a glyph in the first place. But I digress. Long story short, you can see that the radius size is 3, but the next radius will increase at level 15. That's not all that you're going to end up getting by leveling up your glyphs. You will also get the bonus stat, will end up giving you slightly more passive damage or passive buff of whatever it is. The thing is that as you end up going into higher tiered nightmare dungeons, you're going to end up getting even more glyph XP, and all the while you're also getting more character XP, which gives you more Paragon slots. Now, the way that this really ends up going big mode for me was that if you continue further on and get to the board attachment gate, you'll see that you will actually be able to left click on this and attach a whole other board of Paragon choices. And I didn't, for the life of me, even know that that existed, because the game doesn't tell you about it, just as it doesn't tell you about the glyphs. You are going to end up having a bunch of different options for your next board that you can end up putting on. Don't worry if you end up making a mistake, because you can always deattach the board. However, the more points that you invest into the skill tree basically means the more gold you're going to waste pulling all of those nodes out and regressing finally to the back end of the board, so that you can end up unequipping it and equipping a different one. Another thing too that you'll notice is as you're equipping a board, you can rotate it. This is going to be because you could start at any of these 4 quadrants on the board, which will, you know, be better or worse for your particular build, right? Now, the cool thing is that if you end up reading the description of the boards, it does tell you quite literally what the board is going to be focused on. So in my case, I ended up going for the board that will ultimately end up making my minions god tier, but it's going to require a lot of additional Paragon levels in order to end up doing that. So you'll see that as I ended up going over to here, I got a passive buff that made my minions a bit stronger, and then I got my first legendary node, which there is going to end up being legendary nodes in all of these Paragon boards, and this is a significant increase to my minions, which, you know, all of the legendary ones are going to end up being very, very significant towards your character. But you'll notice that if I ended up going this way instead, maybe I wanted to start up here, I could have got this one, and then I could have got my next glyph socket. So if you have really, really high level glyphs, then maybe it would be more imperative to go for the glyph socket immediately. But as of right now, you know, I'm only level 61, so there's not really that much of a point in doing that.